All right, so we'll start now. So everyone could see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, great. So before we really delve into the sources, and there are a lot of sources that I do want to cover, I think it's beneficial if we tell a certain story that I like to tell. I tell the story very often, but I think it's something worth mentioning. So does anybody know anything about bamboo trees? Anybody ever hear about a bamboo tree? So interesting thing about the Chinese bamboo tree is that it takes, 5 years of watering a certain spot in the ground in order for this tree to grow. So you can imagine some farmer goes and he decides he's going to plant a bamboo tree, and the farmer next door sees every day for 5 years straight the guy is going and watering some random spot in the ground, and he literally has nothing to show for it for about 5 years. And the guy goes over to him. He says, "Listen, buddy, I see you here every day. You're not really accomplishing anything. All you're doing is watering the spot on the ground. Maybe you have the wrong spot. You're not even sure. What's going on with you?" He says, "Listen, I'm planting this bamboo tree. And after 5 years, after not growing 1 inch, the bamboo tree grows a total of 90 feet in the span of 6 weeks. That's 90 feet in 6 weeks. So the question is, did that bamboo tree grow 90 feet in 6 weeks, or did it grow 90 feet in 5 years and 6 weeks? So I think the answer I'd like to say is that no, it was the entire process that went into making that bamboo tree what it was. And I think this class, where we're hopefully going to discuss the concept of the covenant, and I think this mashal of the bamboo tree is perfect for understanding what the covenant is all about. So let's dive right in. Today is obviously Tish'a BeAb, and the person who is most intimately aware of Tish'a BeAb, the person who brings Tish'a BeAb into our knowledge, into our consciousness, is Yirmiyahu. Yirmiyahu is Ani HaGever in Megillat Echa. He is the one who is suffering firsthand. And what's the problem? What's going wrong that leads to the destruction of the temple? There's many different angles you could take, but Yirmiyahu takes a moral perspective. What does he say? He says, "Mi teneni bamidbar." He says, I am so sick of being around this environment. I wish I could be transported to the desert. Melon orhim. Let me go away from my nation. And this is almost like echoing the feeling of God. They are all adulterous. They're cheating on God in a sense. By being immoral, they're cheating on God. Their tongue is like an arrow. They're doing nothing with faithfulness. They don't even know God. They just do evil after evil. It's a lack of morality. And where does that come from? Everybody be careful from one another. It's not safe around your friend. What does that remind you? What does that sound like? It's a play on the name of our nation, Yisrael, Yaakov. But it's saying you're twisting yourself. You're not acting like Yisrael, Yashar El. You're acting like crookedness. That's what Yaakov means. Everybody's acting in deceit and in self-interest. So that's the problem. People are not thinking on a national level. Everybody is so self-absorbed in their own destiny, in a sense. They can't think about the destiny of the nation. So I think that's why I began with this quote, is that the concept of the covenant has everything to do with our national existence. And we need to change our perspective from ourselves to our nation as a whole. So how do we understand evil? There's so much evil that's going on during the destruction of the temple and throughout history, of course, the Holocaust and any example you could give. How do the leaders of different generations deal with that evil? What is the nature of the covenant and what are its intrinsic features? So the beauty of these different sources is that we're going to take a bird's eye perspective of where the covenant is acting in every different time point throughout Jewish history, throughout the Tanakh, and seeing what is the meaning of it? What is it getting at? What is the underlying process under the content of the covenant? So we'll begin with Moshe Rabbeinu and the golden calf, right? That's one of the first debacles that we know of in our nation's history. And he says, "Ve'atayim tisach hatatam, ve'im ayin mehenina misifrecha asher katavta." This is the exact remedy to all the problems that we've faced. The problems that we've faced are self-interest and putting yourself out of the purview of the entire nation. Your destiny is not dependent on the nation. Moshe Rabbeinu does the exact opposite. He says, my destiny, Hashem, is going to depend on their destiny. You can't save only me. I'm not going to allow you to do that, God. Whatever you do to the people, you do to me. That's a leader. That's a member of Am Yisrael who understands exactly what God is trying to make him understand. God says, okay, but there's still individual justice. That's the way it works. And you look at Moshe here, we're not going to read every word just for lack of time, but he's saying to God, I want to understand your ways. And I want to find favor in your eyes, not just for my own personal upliftment, not for my own personal spiritual development, but rather, not like the monk on the mountaintop who only wants to seek enlightenment for himself. He's not self-absorbed. He wants to gain this higher perspective of the divine in order to be able to argue for them from a higher perspective. He wants to be better equipped to argue for Bnei Israel. And what does he say? This is your nation, God. This is not my nation. Because God kept saying, Moshe, this is your nation. God, Moshe says, no. God, this is your nation too. So God, again, is throwing it back at Moshe. He's saying, Moshe, I'll be good with you. With them, I'm not sure. It's all of our destiny here. Don't take any of us out of here if you're not going to act with favor towards us. He can't just say Amecha. He has to show it's me and them. He's putting himself in their category. It has to be with all of us. He keeps on repeating it. This is who a leader is. He wants to seek this higher understanding of God. And now the most unbelievable thing happens. Because he did this, because he showed God that he is the game changer in God's plan, God says, okay, now I'm going to reveal something to you, Moshe. Because you were persistent and because you showed me that you cared enough, not just about your destiny, but about the national destiny, I'm going to give you a secret. And the secret is the blueprints of how reality works. That's what the covenant is. Right? We know Hashem kel rachum v'hanun. How does the covenant work? When you want to see justice, it might not happen immediately in your time. And if you're a good-hearted person, you're not going to be able to understand that. And yet, it will happen. Maybe it'll take 3 to 4 generations or 70 years or whatever you want to call it. But Moshe, it will happen. And I need you to hang on. And I need you to build and to plant and to invest in the nation. Despite not seeing results right now, you need to have that faith that it will happen. That's the secret of the covenant that Moshe learns. And how interesting is this? I made a small table here. You see on the right, this is from Parashat Noah, right? Or the end of Parashat Bereshit. God says he wants to destroy humanity. Why? Because everything that they think of is evil all day. And then when he decides to change his mind, he says, I'm not going to destroy them ever again. Why should I not destroy them ever again? Because everything they think is always evil. It's like, okay, God, which is it? You said you wanted to destroy them because they're evil. And now you're saying you want to not destroy them because they're evil. Which is it? What changed in between? Amazingly, we see the exact same predicament here in our parasha with Moshe. God says, look, they're a stiff-necked nation. I got to destroy them. Let me kill them all. And then at the end, what does Moshe use to convince God as proof of why God should be dwelling among us? The opposite of destroying us. Because they're a stiff-necked nation. Again, it's the same question. I don't understand. If you're going to dwell with us, for the same reason you want to destroy us, it doesn't make any sense. The question is, what's the difference? Who can tell me what's the difference? What happened in between this and this? What happened in between this and this? Anyone have an answer? I'll tell you what I think. I think the difference is that the leader in each situation is showing God that they have a game changer. That's them. They're showing God that that God has a partner in existence. Noach is showing God, I am the game changer. God, you thought that's it for humanity? I'm involved. I care. I care to be there for the nation. And because I'm the game changer, now God is going to use the same thing that was our flaw to be our greatest strength. It could be the thing that gives us all the inspiration for going from the lowest of lows to the highest of highs. And the same thing with Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe shows God, you're right, they are a stiff-necked nation, but I'm here. I'm here to work with you. I'm here to invest. And because I'm here, you got me, God. I'm your agent in the field, and therefore, you have nothing to fear. I'm going to be there for you, and I'm going to transform their greatest weakness into their greatest strength. That's the meaning of the covenant. How about Abraham Avinu, when he was still called Avram? What do we see? He also receives a covenant from God. He says, Adonai Elohim, ma titen li v'anochi olech ariri. He said, he doesn't see the justice in this. These are always questions of justice. He says, God, I don't even have any children. What are you going to possibly give to me? Adonai Elohim, but and even if I do have kids, what does that mean? How do I know that they're going to be worthy of it? Even if I'm currently a moral person, what if my children don't act in my ways? What if they're not worthy of the covenant? What if they're not worthy of you being with them like you've been promising me, God? And God says the same thing, basically, that he says to Moshe Rabbeinu. Let's understand this. Take all these animals that are 3 years old, everything having to do with 3, 3, 3. Right? And he takes all these animals, he splits them in half. And then the fourth animal, he doesn't split the bird in half. And by the way, if you're keeping score at home, it's 3 and 3 split in half. And then the fourth is a bird. Total of 8. 8 is signifies the covenant. Jojo Towel, I hope you're listening. And so the 3 generations are going to suffer, but the fourth, the bird, will fly away. The bird is going to be the one to fly away into freedom. And that's what he tells them. Regarding your children, you know what? They might find themselves in Mitzrayim. 3 generations will suffer. And it might even be 400 years, right? 400 years of suffering. It's all this play on 3 to 4. It's not even about the numbers. 400 years is not the same amount of time as 3 to 4 generations. And yet he's hitting on that number, 3 and 4. At the end of the day, it will all be okay. Because when you invest in a nation, when there's a person like Moshe who will be the game changer, they will fly away to freedom. And just keep these words in mind. Is anything beyond me, says God? And that's having to do with the birth of Yitzhak, because Abraham Avinu himself needed to have a child in order for any of this to be possible. So God is saying, nothing is beyond me. Keep those words in mind. Now we go to Yirmiyahu. The time that we're discussing, of course, is the destruction of the first temple. And again, we see God is promising him the same concept that we learned just now about the covenant. It's going to be 70 years that they're going to be in exile. But after the 70 years, they'll come back. And the covenant will, again, come into play. Again, here, 70 years. I'm not going to read every word. And look at these words. He even says, the same words that we heard from Moshe Rabbeinu are being echoed here to Yirmiyahu. Yirmiyahu is being reminded by God, don't underestimate the covenant. Don't underestimate that golden message that I taught to Moshe about what the blueprints of reality are. That no matter how much you could suffer, there's always a way to come back from it. And he says, Kahal Gadol Yashuvu Henna. What does that remind you of? Exactly almost the same words that he says to Abraham Avinu, V'dor Revi'i Yashuvu Henna. He's trying to remind Yirmiyahu with times from Moshe Rabbeinu, from Abraham Avinu. Every which way, he's reminding Yirmiyahu, don't forget what your forefathers learned about the covenant. All right, and he tells Yirmiyahu, this is your job. Your job is lintosh, v'lintotz, v'laharos, ul'abid, ul'hareya. You're going to be a destroyer in the sense that there's going to be a lot of destruction that you're witnessing and that you're prophesizing about. The building and the planting, though, is your real job. You're going to be the one that's investing, just like the guy with the bamboo tree. You're going to be investing every single day. And it's going to come to fruition eventually. You might not live to see it, but it will come to fruition. And look, like,
I'm seeing a lot of sorry to cut you off a little bit.
Please.
There's so many connections to prayer. It talks about the sprouting, the seeds of salvation. I think that's in Etzemech David.
Yes, beautiful. Etzemech David, exactly.
Yeah.
That's exactly what the covenant is. It's a cultivation of something.
Yeah.
Beautiful, Morris. Thank you.
And v'ne'emanatai, also like having faith in us, even when we're yishnei afar, even when we're sleeping in the
beautiful
dust.
When we're in the dust, exactly, 100%. And look what he says. He says, so now Yirmiyahu is told by God to go buy his cousin's field. Yirmiyahu is sitting in jail in Jerusalem, and he knows that it's about to be overtaken by the Bavlim, by the Babylonians. And God says, I want you to buy the field from your cousin. And he does it in front of everybody. He's like very confused. He says, God, what am I buying this plot of land if the whole land is going to be taken over? And he says, aha, Yirmiyahu, you underestimate me. Is anything more wondrous than I can do? Remember I told you those words from Abraham Avinu? The only 2 times in the whole Tanakh that phrase appears is there and in Yirmiyahu. He's trying to remind Yirmiyahu what the covenant means. And look, he says, okay, just like you had a Berit ben Abetarim with Abraham Avinu, what did Bnei Israel do during the time of Yirmiyahu? They did a Berit ben Abetarim, and they promised that they wouldn't take their slaves back. They would let their slaves go. And what did they do? They went and they took them back anyway. That was their immorality. So it was a direct failure of the covenant in the time of Yirmiyahu. So we're getting a glimpse into what's going on. What's going on is Yirmiyahu is kind of vacillating and oscillating between these 2 different sides. Should he have faith in the covenant, or should he lose all hope and at the horrible pain and destruction that's going on before him? And God keeps having to remind him it's all about the perspective that you take. It's all about you deciding to be the agent in the world that makes the difference. He says, Yirmiyahu, don't forget, I had faith in humanity because of Noah, because of Abraham Avinu, because of Moshe Rabbeinu. Yirmiyahu, you're my agent right now. You're no different than them. How about Eliyahu? Eliyahu Hanavi, such an unbelievable, interesting character. What's going on with him? He is compared to Moshe Rabbeinu. He goes into the desert, and he goes for 40 days, 40 nights, not eating, sleeping, or drinking, the same desert as Moshe. And he goes to the same mountain as Moshe, Hara Elohim. He goes to a certain cave, a certain crevice in the rock, the same place where Moshe Rabbeinu got his 13 attributes from God. And God says, what are you doing here, Eliyahu? Why are you here? Shouldn't you be going and helping Bnei Israel and guiding them on the path? I know that Bnei Israel were not doing the right thing, but you're my guy. You're my agent in the field. Eliyahu, I need you. And what does he say? Eliyahu says, no, I was zealous for you, God. Everyone left your covenant. And that's it. I'm done. If the people can't live up to the covenant, I'm not going to be with them. Similar to what Yirmiyahu says, I wish I could just go fly away to the desert. That's literally what Eliyahu does. And what does God say? I'm going to teach you a lesson, Eliyahu. He says, I want you to stand in the same crevice where Moshe Rabbeinu stood. Right? Just same thing with Moshe, same thing with Eliyahu. And he hears an unbelievable earthquake, and he sees an all-consuming fire, and he witnesses these unbelievable things. An earthquake, a fire, and a stormy wind. And God says, that's not where you find me. You don't find me in the fireworks of life. You don't find me in the light show. Where do you find me? You find me in the Kol Dem Amadaka. You find me in the everyday, in the still small voice, in the small actions that you take to impact the nation. That's where you find me. It's one person at a time, one olam at a time. I was just telling everyone earlier, he who saves one life, it's as though he saves an entire world. Why is that? Each person is a world. So Eliyahu is getting so lost in the suffering of everybody. God has to remind him, no, it's not just about everybody. It's about each person one at a time. And each person makes up the whole nation. So that was the issue for Eliyahu. He couldn't come to terms with God's message about the covenant. that you might not live to see the justice. And sure enough, what happens? Eliyahu is not the one who sees the justice, and neither does Elisha, nor does the guy after him. It's the person next in line, so the fourth person in line that sees the justice to Izebel, the evil queen. So it's always the same message that God is saying, 3 to 4 generations may suffer, but at the end of the day, justice will prevail. Just like, what does Martin Luther King say? Something so beautiful. He says the moral arc of the universe always bends towards justice. At the end of the day, that's the rule. The rule is that if you invest and if you have humanity just by virtue of the world existing the way it does, the way God set it up, no matter how much you suffer, things will look up eventually. It just takes that one person. We could talk about the suffering of Yosef HaSadik, a person that suffered tremendously. He was a national figure, but he went through the worst trials and tribulations that anybody could imagine. And what does it say at the end of his life? Again, hints to the covenant. Vayar Yosef le'Ephraim b'nei shel leshim. He sees the third generation being born. Gam b'nei Machir ben Menashe yiledu al birkei Yosef. Right? The same concept here. He sees the third to fourth generation being born. Even though he suffered so tremendously, he realizes, there is a future. And even though I'm still stuck in Egypt, I'm seeing the future generation. And who is it? B'nei Machir ben Menashe. And who is that? That's the person that ends up going and capturing a part of Israel. So even though I'm stuck in Egypt right now, I'm seeing the seeds being planted for a future for our nation. And he says, the same language of the covenant. He's going to remember you. He's going to kick in the covenant, and when he does, I want you to bring my bones to Israel, because he has faith in the future. So when you're going through a tough time, and this is important point I wanted to make, this is not only true on a national level. Yes, it is true that we cannot divorce our destiny from the destiny of the nation. But at the same time, it's true for each of us. What does Winston Churchill say so beautifully? When you're going through hell, keep going. It doesn't matter if something that is not going right for you. You got to be your own Mashiach, as Morris Franco says to me all the time. You got to be your own savior. You could be that person, the game changer. Just like God is looking for a game changer, you need to be the game changer in your own life. Control your own destiny. If you could boil down the entire Torah to one concept, I really believe it's that God has faith in you to be great. And he wants to empower you to solve your own issues and step up and rise to meet your own challenges. And finally, we could talk about Eov and Hannah. Eov is the paradigm of somebody who suffers. And we see, amazingly, the Tanakh gives him his space, and it says it is correct to question God. It's okay to question God. It's important to do that, because if you don't, you're not going to have a real relationship with God. So question God and ask him, why is this happening? The greatest leaders are the ones who question God. And at the end of his life, even though he realizes, you know what, I'm never going to understand the ways of God. That's basically it. God says to him, where were you when I strung together the stars of the night sky? Where were you when I laid the foundations of the earth? You have no way of comprehending. Even if I wanted to tell you these deeper meaning of the world, I wouldn't be able to. Like he says to Moshe Rabbeinu, a person cannot possibly comprehend the totality of existence and still live. But yet, at the end of Eov's life, what do we see? He has all these children. After having all his children die, he has new children. And the name of his third child is Keren Hapuch. His lot has been turned over. His cornucopia has been overturned from evil to good, because that could happen at any time. Again, it's the fourth generation that he sees. So the Tanakh keeps hitting on this idea. It says this is the nature of the covenant. This is the nature of humanity. It just takes enough strength to hold on through the tough times. And that's what today is. Today is a tough time. It's a tough time for our nation. We're remembering the destruction of the Beit Mikdash, but really with that, we're remembering all the suffering that we've gone through as a nation and as individuals. Of course, we're in the midst of coronavirus right now. So much suffering going on with that. But at the end of the day, I think the message that the Torah is saying is, it's okay to question. It's okay to protest. But at the end of the day, you got to step up. You got to be that game changer. Because God wants to be the partner with you. But he can only partner with you if you're a willing participant in that partnership. And there's nothing more beautiful and empowering than that. So I left a couple of notes here. We don't really have time to go through everything. But if you want to philosophize about this concept of what is suffering, a lot of people ask me, why did God create a world where suffering is even possible? Wouldn't it have been much better if God just said, you know what, I'm going to create a world of only good? It seems to me that that's just physically impossible. It's like saying, God, can you please create for me a four-sided triangle? By definition, a triangle cannot have four sides. By definition, good cannot exist without evil. And beyond that, the degree of good that you want to exist has to be equal and opposite to the degree of evil that can possibly exist. So you want an answer to good and evil? It's that both of them need to coexist. Without one, you cannot have the other. But it's up to us to decide how much are we going to invest in swaying the scale towards one. And when we do find ourselves in the midst of evil, do we allow ourselves to completely disintegrate, or do we remember all it takes is me being there, empowering myself, being empowered by God, and having faith that things could get better? So be like that planter. Be like the person who is not seeing the results and yet keeps going. The guy who waters the bamboo tree every day while seeing no results. Because at the end of those 5 years, you will see that bamboo tree shoot up 90 feet. So thank you guys. Really, what a beautiful turnout we have. I would like to open it up to questions until they kick us off.
You're great, Mikey.
ID, I love you and I miss you. Thank you so much for coming.
So I have a question, might be related, but how come in Judaism, everybody waits till the bottom of the ninth to have emunah? What's your take on that?
So that's the thing,
But I love the expression you said, that when he said, when you're going through hell, keep going.
Yes, exactly. It's not saying, this will get better. It's saying just hold on, So I think.
Does that mean there's light at the end of the tunnel? Keep going? Is that what
I believe it does mean that, but I don't think he's saying, don't worry, it's all going to be okay.
Right,
I think he's saying, just keep going because you never know what's going to happen.
Right.
Because telling a person that's suffering, it will all be okay, kind of seems disingenuous. So you're asking me about the bottom of the ninth. I think that's exactly it. The only time we ever really do grow, the only time we're forced to grow is in the bottom of the ninth with 2 outs. When we have all that suffering and all that pain and all the discomfort, that's when we grow. Nobody ever really grew in complete comfort and complete complacency. We need that nudge from existence, from the world, from God, in order to really grow.
Right. Great. Thanks, man.